All right, welcome to mini unfridging number 3, part 3. Yeah, this one wasn't so mini, but this is the final segment for it. Basically just got a few more things to show off, just a few. And we're going to start off with this Apple II Plus. Now, if you've been following this channel for a while, you probably already know I've got quite a few Apple II Pluses, so why am I getting another one? Well, partly by accident. I was sort of intending to bid on a different Apple II Plus, a parts unit that I suspected had a Rev 3 Apple II motherboard in it, which is not common in the II Plus, and was a version of the board that I have never had before. But in the last moments of that auction, I accidentally stumbled on this one and got them confused because they were both ending at the same time. And I don't know how I got them confused because this one obviously is a lot more put together than the other. But yeah, basically I just totally muffed it and I ended up with this Apple II Plus. That said, it's not necessarily uninteresting because if we lift her up here, flip her over, check out that serial number. Now that would be low for an original Apple II, but for a II Plus, that's insanely low. Apple II Pluses, we don't really know the exact production numbers, but it's somewhere around 300 to over 500,000. I think it's closer to 500,000. I have a machine that's stamped with a serial number of 588,000. I've seen serial numbers all the way up to 1 million with these, so you know, it's hard to tell because Apple kind of is loosey-goosey with their serial numbers sometimes. And the original Apple II famously has a serial number gap of about 20,000 between serial number 40,000 and 60,000, where there doesn't seem to be any machines with serial numbers in that gap. So it's not always 100% with Apple. I know for certain that there were hundreds of thousands of these things made. In terms of how it relates to the original Apple II, the Apple II Plus isn't really any different functionally, other than the fact that it has a different version of BASIC in ROM. The original Apple II came with Steve Wozniak's integer BASIC, which was the BASIC he started developing with the Apple I. The problem with integer BASIC, though, was it couldn't handle floating point numbers. So they decided to update it, and they basically just licensed a version of Microsoft BASIC and then customized it for Apple's needs, put it in ROM, and that's it. In terms of the physical hardware, nothing really with the Apple II changed, other than it was more typically sold with the full 48K of memory, whereas the original Apple II started off with as little as 4K. And then later on, there were some changes where they actually added things like radio frequency shielding inside the case to be more compliant with FCC regulations. And, you know, the motherboard did receive a series of improvements over time, mostly just tweaks to improve timing, stability, stuff like that. Nothing really amazing. This Apple II Plus is actually probably in the top 5 for lowest serial numbers that I've seen for an Apple II Plus. The very earliest one I've seen was around serial number 300-ish, and it sold some years ago. They aren't really worth a lot of money though. The lowest serial number 300-ish one I saw, I think only went for about $700. This went for about half that. It's not really one of those things that collectors are falling all over each other for. There are versions of the Apple II Plus, obviously, that command more money, like the Euro Plus and the J Plus, and then, of course, the Black Bell & Howell II Plus, which is probably the ultimate collector piece from this line. But having a really, really super low serial number Apple II Plus doesn't seem to really have much cachet with collectors, at least from the few auctions that I've seen. So based on a very limited sample size like that, I can't say authoritatively what should be in an early Apple II Plus, but I feel pretty confident that they should resemble a mid to later original Apple II, somewhere probably serial numbers 30, 35,000, based on the serial numbers from power supplies and just the overall composition of the machine. At this point in time, when the II and the II Plus were being produced, they were literally being produced side by side. And my understanding is you could have a pile of parts and literally one part could go down one line and one part could go down the other line. And one of those machines would become a II with the integer ROMs installed, and the other would become a II Plus. So physically, operationally, at this stage of production for the II Plus, there's literally no difference. They haven't done any of the RFI stuff yet. It's basically just an Apple II that they've put a different badge and different ROMs in, and that's it. Even the serial number label looks basically the same. It looks like an original Apple II serial number label, but just in green instead of black. So yeah, based on the few examples I've seen, including a machine that was a few serial numbers higher than this one, I believe this keyboard is probably not the correct one. This is the later two-piece style keyboard that has the encoder board that plugs into the bottom. I believe the very first Apple II Pluses came with this keyboard here, which is basically a single piece unit, and it would have had the full power key, power indicator light over here, just like the original Apple II did. The legend I've read is that those buttons were replaced with these flat square ones because people kept mashing them thinking that they were power switches. So yeah, and that only existed on the 2 Plus, as far as we can tell, for a very, very short time. And then things changed and they went to these square ones on both the 2 and the 2 Plus. All right, so now I'm going to lift the lid off and we're going to have a look underneath here and see what you got with an early original Apple II Plus. And I'm actually going to lift the entire thing off because this machine is an active project. It's having some fairly major issues. When you turn it on, you get absolutely nothing on screen unless you kind of tap around in here. I've tested literally every chip. That's why some of them are missing, because they're just temporarily out of the machine. But it seems to be some sort of I think it's a corrosion issue, possibly in the CPU socket or in this general area here. Because if you flex it or tap it just the right way, you can actually get something on screen, but just very briefly, and then, yeah, it doesn't work. But otherwise, what we have under the hood here is pretty much a stock revision 4 Apple II motherboard. This is the exact same board that was appearing in production in the original Apple II, and there's literally no difference whatsoever. They're not serialized. Only the very first revision 0 and a few of the Rev 1 boards were serialized. All of the other ones, they just have a date code. So this one says 7927, looks like. So yeah, middle of 1979. That kind of lines up with my own records as to what serial number the Apple II was at that point, the original one, which is roughly around early to mid 30,000s. You might be asking, how do I know this is a Rev 4? Well, the Rev 4 is actually one of the easier ones to identify because it has this little, it's going to be probably hard to see, but there's the letters REV, Rev, and then there's actually an 04 underneath the bottom of this socket here. And yeah, that's your first clue. None of the other boards had that. Another thing that will tell us, and unfortunately this isn't always something a seller is willing to do, but if they do lift the CPU off, you'll see it has a part number, 820-001, can't really see the 1, -04. The final 2 digits tell you what revision the board is. I believe all of the original 7 revisions of the board have that feature, except for the Rev 0. The Rev 0 does not have those markings at all. But the Rev 0 is pretty easy to spot because it doesn't have this color killer transistor down here. And then another thing you can look at, I'll just pull this off for a sec, are these memory configuration blocks. On the revisions previous to the Rev 4, these were removable, and you could actually substitute them with blocks like these. So you would just take one of these off, plug it in there, and then you could use, well, in this case, you could have 16 kilobytes in the first row and then 4K and 4K in the second rows. But at the time that the 2 Plus is out, and by the time the Apple II is this late in production, memory has come down a lot in price, and there's really no reason to be using the lower density chips anymore. And as far as I know, most Apple II Pluses came with the full 48K. This one's missing the 2 rolls because I took them out, but that's typically how they came. And then they would often have more RAM via a language card, they called it, that plugged into this slot here. So yeah, you can tell usually the earlier versions of the board because they're obviously popped out a little bit because there's actually a socket underneath that these plug into. It can be a little tricky depending on the angle and the quality of the photograph with the seller, because I don't know, a lot of eBay sellers have no clue how to operate a camera. Another thing that makes this machine kind of unique is it has a silver power supply. Apple used these silver colored power supplies right from the very beginning of Apple II production, but they're much less common in the 2 Plus. They seem to be something that were only found in the very earliest 2 Pluses. And I think it was just simply a case of they started up Apple II Plus production alongside the 2, and they simply grabbed parts from the same parts bin they were grabbing for the original 2, and they didn't want to modify the serial number system they were using. So yeah, I mean, this power supply may have found its way into an Apple II with a serial number somewhere 35, 36, thousand or so. Generally the power supplies were serialized in a way that they were fairly close to the original machine number for the original Apple II. For the II Plus, not so much. They're kind of all over the place because they were being shared widely across between the two units for, however long the original II lasted. I like that this one's still got the foam around the speaker there, and, it's pretty clean overall. I mean, it's not, I've seen some boards that look absolutely bagged, but this one looks pretty nice. It came with all the original standoffs. The nut here I've obviously removed because I've been pulling the board out a lot. But yeah, I'm hoping to get it working. I don't know how much difficulty that's going to be. I could, of course, just cheat and pick up a Rev4 board off the internet. The Rev4 numerically, as far as I can tell, is the most common board for the original Apple II. Obviously, it's not for the II Plus. The II Plus used the Rev4 for a little while. Then it went to the Rev7 alongside the original Apple II. And then they did the radio frequency updates for these. And that's when they changed to what are known as the RFI boards, which essentially are the same board, but they've been tweaked again for, I assume, for radio interference and also for some timing issues and stuff like that. If you're looking to have an authentic Apple II experience without paying the insane prices that original Apple IIs go for, definitely look for one of these. It doesn't have to be a low serial number, obviously. But, there were literally hundreds of thousands of Apple IIs built. So there's more than enough out there for every collector, probably times 5. Unless it's something special like the Bell & Howell, quite honestly, I wouldn't pay any more than 50 to 100 bucks for one of these things because there's just so darn many of them. Anyway, that's the Apple II Plus. Let's move on to the next thing. Okay, so next up I've got a few random cards that I've picked up over the last year. And the first of these I'm going to show off is a MITS Altair 8800 1 kilobyte static RAM board. 1 kilobyte. Eat your heart out, guys. So I purchased this because I recently purchased a partially built partial Altair kit. It's really awkward to say, that was found in an estate sale. It was something that somebody had started, not finished, and a whole bunch of pieces had gone missing over the years, including the memory board, which is kind of essential to get the thing up and running. Now, an early Altair 8800 system typically would have had one of these boards, and it probably wasn't even filled out as far as this one was. A lot of them that I've seen only had, 256 bytes installed. But yeah, I went on a bit of a hunt for one of these, and it turns out they're not the easiest cards to find on eBay or anywhere else. They're pretty uncommon. So initially, I was going to go with this guy, which is a 4 kilobyte dynamic RAM card. But, just looking at it, you get a sense that maybe this thing doesn't work that well. And in fact, I looked it up. This card had a lot of problems. And in fact, this card is probably the reason why MITS lost control of their own baby, in a sense, and why so many other companies eventually came up and developed the S100 bus further. This card was very late to production. It gave MITS an awful lot of trouble in terms of engineering. And then when it did come out, it was not very reliable. And by then, some other notable manufacturers had stepped into the void with their own much better designed products that were compatible with the S100 bus. And eventually those companies would go on to develop their own systems, and MITS would just kind of get pushed aside. So yeah, I got one of these cards, but I started reading about it and kind of realized it probably wasn't likely to work. So yeah, I went back and just kind of kept looking and finally found this one. And like I said, these things are not very common, and they go for big bucks when they sell sometimes. I've seen them go for as much as $700 for a fully filled out 1 kilobyte card. I got this one obviously for a lot less than that. I just kind of was patient and somebody popped it up in a bunch of other random S100 gear. So yeah, and that will go nicely with this other thing I bought, which is not a card, but this is an original Altair 8800 badge for the front of the case. So yeah, these are not very common either. And I almost got a complete front panel for my Altair, including all the switches and lights and everything, which kind of would have negated the need for the front panel board that came with the kit. I was kind of a little bit reluctant on that, but I've been trying to get the front dress panel for the 8800, and they do come up once in a while loose, not very often. The front panel boards typically go for, a couple $100, But whenever I get involved in an auction for some reason, the price always goes to the obscene, most extreme end of the spectrum. And that one went for almost $700. And I just said, no, I can't afford that. Can't justify it. So yeah, you know, on the one hand, I guess that's a good thing because it forces me to use the original front panel PCB that the partial kit came with. But then I'm still in the hole trying to find the original Altair front dress panel, which is not easy. Anyway, that's the Altair stuff. Keeping in the S100 vein, here is another card. Now, if you've been watching my unbuilt kits video, you've seen this card already, or at least one of these cards. This is a Byte MPU card. So this was the CPU card for the Byte 8 computer system, which was developed, I believe, by Byte Magazine. And it was basically an Altair alternative. And I think they had a RAM card and some other stuff. And yeah, they had a chassis of their own. It was basically an Altair knockoff. But I think the Byte was an improvement. I think it had some monitor software built in on ROM that you could use. And yeah, this board is built. It looks like they scavenged all the ICs from it. And yeah, there's a few TI sockets here, but it looks like the majority of what they were using were these, they're called Molex strip headers or something like that. They're basically pins that I think were typically used to do repairs, but a lot of hobbyists use them as a replacement for sockets because they were just easy to work with. And basically what you do is there's a little tab across the top, basically cut off enough to fit on whatever side of the socket you're working on, plug them in, solder them down, and then you break the tab off, and that separates them electrically. Yeah, these were very popular back in the 70s, but unfortunately they scavenged all the chips. But the nice thing with this is I don't feel bad about building it because it's already built. You know, the other card is completely untouched. So I can basically just reinstall the chips that should be there, and then I can show off, you know, the completed unit versus how it arrived to the original builder. So yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. And it's got the little lift tabs here on the corner. So yeah, it's too bad the rest of the system wasn't with it, but that's how it goes. All right, what do we got here? So if you're an eagle-eyed vintage PC enthusiast, I think you can tell right through the wrapping what this is. This is, let me just unwrap it here. This thing is really well wrapped. Holy smokes. So this, you must know what this is. This is an IBM color graphics adapter board, aka CGA. And yeah, I didn't buy this out of any great nostalgia for this card. Basically, I spent most of my childhood trying to get away from CGA graphics. We had an IBM 5170 and it had an ATI something or other in it that was CGA capable. And yeah, four colors sucks. It sucks for pretty much everything, especially for Sierra games, which I was into, because the four color palette really limits what you can see on screen. And there's a lot of stuff in various games that I just completely missed because I didn't know it was there because I couldn't see it. You know, it was blending in. I bought this because if you'll recall, I did a video on the Computerland BC88, and in that machine was a card that supposedly was capable of doing color and monochrome, but I could never get it to actually do that. So I assumed there was a problem with the card, but I had forgotten that there are jumpers on the actual system itself that you have to change in order to enable color graphics. And you know, in my defense, it's been about 30 something years. I used to know all that stuff off the top of my head, but I've forgotten. I've gotten kind of spoiled with just being able to plug and play stuff. So yeah, I kind of stepped through that with somebody, and we kind of figured out that the jumpering system that Computerland used was fairly close, but not exactly the same as what was used in the IBM XT. So I got color up and working there. So this card is kind of surplus to requirements for now. It might go into one of my IBM machines just to provide a representative example. But yeah, like I said, I don't get very nostalgic about 4-color graphics. I'm more excited about 16 color. I remember the holler of triumph I let out when I discovered that my father's T5100 Toshiba laptop had EGA on it. And I plugged in our IBM 5154 monitor, and suddenly I could play Police Quest like everybody else could. So yeah, not a lot of nostalgia there. This card's probably gonna sit on a shelf for quite a while as a spare or something. All right, next up, we have this. This is the Lambda 8300. This is a clone of the Sinclair ZX81. If you can believe that somebody actually wanted to clone that. I just picked this up for cheap. I think it was like 20 bucks or something. And yeah, it's a slight improvement, I guess, on the original. So we got a Z80 CPU, expandable up to 32 kilobytes of RAM, 42 key keyboard, programmable speaker output, direct drive with thermal printer, 24 rows by 32 characters video, reverse video characters available, high resolution graphics capability, automatic repeat. Yeah, so I mean, it's got some features for sure. And I have seen, I think it was on YouTube, I've seen some examples of games for this machine and people were able to do a little bit more than you could typically do with the ZX81. And here's a picture of it. So it looks like it uses an Atari style joystick. So yeah, that's just a standard Atari 9-pin port, I guess. So let's see what we got here. Yeah, there's not much in here. So we can see on the bottom here, there's a hole for a speaker. So that's one thing that they improved over the ZX81, which is sound. They also improved the keyboard, which is basically a chiclet keyboard. So not really an improvement in most people's books, but definitely an improvement over the original ZX81 keyboard. Although, again, I don't know why companies do this. They put some keys in non-standard locations, and the space bar is this tiny little thing way over here. I mean, they had all this room. They could have just stuck it down here and, you know, it would have made a whole lot more sense. But yeah, that's the way they roll. Now, again, they do have some graphics characters. They've got a few quote-unquote sprite kind of characters. They've got the little car. They got, I don't know what that is, some kind of alien, some other kind of alien, and a ghost. But like I said, from what I've been able to discern, for things like the car, they don't have it in 4 different directions. So basically your car can only drive in one direction, which is kind of weird. They also have some kind of almost like Petsky kind of graphics here. And then at the back, we have our power, we have our tape recorder connections and monitor, just like the ZX81. Then we've got this external bus connector, and then we've got a joystick port. So you can actually use a joystick with this thing, which is a significant improvement over the ZX81. And then we've got a TV port. You know, to try to compete with the ZX81, you couldn't really undercut it on price by very much. So it looks like the emphasis in this case was just to add a few features to it that the ZX81 lacked and try and compete that way. But yeah, funky little computer. There's a few different versions of this. I think there was a Dick Smith version, and there may have been some other ones that basically were just named by a model number. But yeah, that is the Lambda 8300. All right, our next contestant is this EKI Micromentor computer, which is based on the Intel 8085, and it's basically a trainer. You can see we've got the standard hexadecimal keypad, all the usual buttons. You got a whole bunch of wires sticking out here that you can interface. These are all the different I/O ports. Looks like there's 3 of them. Yeah, very, very basic little computer. Again, it came up for super cheap. Nobody seemed to be going for it. And I thought, you know what? That's kind of cool. I looked it up. There's not very much information on these online. The only thing I was able to find was an ad that basically mentioned the computer and alluded to a board that supposedly can do speech that can be interfaced with it. And that's basically it. It's just a very basic trainer board for the 8085. Now, of course, I'm going to try and fire it up here. I don't think I'm going to make a dedicated video on this machine unless something really interesting turns up about it, because it's pretty basic. But we're going to use our Amiga power supply here because I know it puts out 5 volts quite reliably. And thankfully, this is one of those boards that isn't a complete mystery because everything is extremely well labeled. You can see we've got plus 5 volts in ground there and plus 5 volts in ground over here. And yeah, looks like you have to power both boards independently of each other. So we will do that. I'm just using my camera mount here to stand it up best I can. Okay, so we'll plug this into one rail. Should be interesting. I might have to lay it down. Probably be easier for typing anyway. Okay. I kind of wish this thing had a better mount or something. It's going to be a little bit janky, but what can we do? Okay, little camera reposition there. And I'll plug this in. Just trying to find a way to get the cable over here without obscuring the view. Oh, and it was already plugged in. And there we go. We got a light, so that's good. There should be a reset button around here somewhere. I don't see it though. Read, write, address. Let's try going to address. Yeah, so there's address 001. I'm gonna write something to it. FF. Yeah, I mean that that about covers it. Let's try going to a different address. 05. So that's kind of cool that you have the numeric display as well as the individual LEDs. It's kind of a good bridge between the different styles of display that various trainers had. So then I'm going to write, I don't know, 1, 3. Look at that. Yeah, I mean, that's right, because if we're going with binary here, that's 1 plus 2 equals 3, and that's 1. So yeah, that's pretty cool. This switch over here appears to basically either have the machine in program mode or in run mode. So obviously we're in program mode right now, otherwise I wouldn't be able to do anything. Let's see, we'll do read. Let's read address 01. Let's read it again. 05 00. I thought I wrote. I wonder if the memory is really working on this. Let's try an experiment. We'll do address 11, and then I'm going to do write, and then I'm going to put FF. And then I don't know if I have to press write again, maybe. Okay, and then I'm going to change addresses to 00. Okay, and then I'm going to change address back to 11. I'm going to read it. Yeah, there's something I'm missing here. I feel like there should be an enter key or something that I'm supposed to hit. Let's try one more time. So this is, it's going to do write, FF, address 12, address 11. Yeah, there's definitely something I'm missing here. I just don't know what it is. It could be that I'm not entering into the right space. Like the memory address space might not start at 00 or 0000. So maybe what I'm entering there is invalid. Yeah, I think there's some reading up I have to do here. For all I know, there could be problems with the switches. Maybe one of the chips isn't inputting things correctly. But yeah, that's the back side of the board. Pull it out there. But yeah, nice that it at least somewhat works. For a few bucks, can't go wrong with that. I hope I find the speech component one day, because that would be cool to check out. But yeah, that is the Micro Mentor. All right, so for our next item, supposing you've heard of this newfangled thing called the internet, and you're kind of interested mainly in sort of email kind of stuff. You know, you just might want to send an email to your aunt across the country and, you know, save a stamp and having to walk to a mailbox. But you don't want to go to the expense and trouble of buying a whole computer, because computers, you know, this is still the mid-90s. Computers are still pretty expensive, and you're not going to use it for anything but email anyway. Well, your local Baby Bell might have the answer. This is a CIDCO EMessage terminal. This is basically a device that does one thing and one thing only, and that is it dials up the internet and it gets your email. and it was available for a pretty reasonable price, I think, if I recall correctly. I wasn't able to find an actual number. I think it's something you kind of rented from your phone company. But yeah, this is it. This is the original box that it came in. SBC Communications. I'm thinking that might be, yeah, Southwestern Bell. Know that name pretty well. And use of the enclosed product and service are subject to the terms within, i.e. they will give you nothing, you will give them everything, and yeah, you'll like that or you can't see what's in the box. So let's open the box. Ooh. Your email is waiting. That sounds kind of ominous. Your email is waiting and it's hungry. All right, so yeah, I mean, there's our little instructional for people who are not computer inclined. Pretty simple stuff. Plug it into your phone line or into your answering machine. It looks pretty basic, doesn't it? And then we got some instructions on, how the navigation keys work. Actually, I lied. It looks like they have more than just email. Of course, so why not, right? Looks like they have a calendar of sorts, and a call log and some other stuff. And it looks like you can create multiple users, obviously, so you don't mix and match your emails, which is kind of nice. Well, here is the same slightly ominous guide in Spanish. And here's the device. Pretty snazzy. So, yeah, it's kind of, it kind of reminds me a lot of the TRS-80 Model 100. It's got that whole slab kind of feel to it. And there's the button. It's pretty unambiguous. Get email. I mean, it, it doesn't get simpler than that. We got a fairly big LCD there. Look at that, actually. Yeah, it pops out a little bit. That's kind of nice. A lot on the side, not very much on the bottom, missing the plate there. And yeah, we got a port for a printer, because obviously you might want to be able to print emails. I don't know what printers it would be compatible with, probably just standard 9-pin dot matrix. There's a 9-volt DC input. There's a phone jack for your handset, and there is a line jack. Yeah, it can be battery powered, but it came with a cord that plugs in there. So yeah, I mean, why don't we turn it on and we'll see what getting your email was like in around, I don't see a date anywhere, but I'm guessing it's probably 1990 something. Okay, and it's already powering on. Nice. So, oh, 1999, I was wrong. Yeah, well, that fits. Okay, can we do anything here, or are we? Yeah, we're locked up. Way to go, CIDCO. Okay, let's try powering it off. Oh, there we go. Nice. That's a pretty decent screen. It's almost like an ebook reading screen. Okay, so obviously we don't have a mouse, and this is not a touch screen, so we have to just use, is it arrow keys? Oh, specifically marked function keys. Okay, so let's go into the inbox and see what's there. Or let's not and say we didn't. Huh, okay. Let's shut her down. Maybe it's just having a mood. Hey, you're on TV here. Cooperate or else. Okay, still can't do anything. Doesn't seem to be responding. Yeah, it definitely seems to be stuck there. Well, that would confuse the hell out of Grandma. There's a reset hole in the back here. I'll try that. Done. Scanning memory data. Oh. What did I do? Okay. That's better. So let's clear the email data. Okay. Are we going to respond now or... yeah, let's see. Inbox. Aha, there we go. Okay. So that's actually working. We don't have any emails to read, which is no good. Let's see if we can go back to the main menu. Nice, now this is actually working. We can create an email to myself. So I am my only friend. I must say, I'm digging the screen. Test. Send a nice message. Motivational type deal. And, oh, we got an address book. Of course, we don't have any actual addresses in it. And there's a fax too there. What? I was thinking fax. Shut up. The caller ID de llamadas entrantes. I don't know. We're not getting anywhere with that. Well, let's just see. We'll do fax to, edit, show detail, create new. There we go. Fax number. We'll just go Hollywood style on that one. Pager, oh man. I remember pagers. I remember that was like the coolest thing in the world to have in the 80s. Okay, so there's my email address. So let's see if it'll fax. So I can fax my email. You can't specify both an email address and a fax number. Oh, come on. Oh, I see what they're doing. Okay, hang on. Let's just go up here and then we will delete that. And now I'm going to send. Oh my God, it actually dials. That is cool. I don't know if you can hear the hissing, but it's definitely trying to dial out there. That's so cool. I totally would have made use of that. I would have been like faxing into work to let them know I wasn't coming in that day. I'll save the changes. Yeah, we'll keep it there. And I'll save it in the outbox, whatever. So that's cool. I mean, that's more functionality than I thought this thing would have. We got our outbox. Nice. Back to the main menu. Create a new email, call log. Yeah, I mean, that would have been nice to have, you know. Call display was kind of an exciting thing in the 90s. And then extras. Okay, let's see what we got. Okay, so we got a calendar. Oh, no, wait, that's a calculator. That's the problem when I'm reading this stuff on an angle. 10, oh, you can't use the actual plus key there. You have to use this goofy thing. Okay, well, it knows how to calculate, so that's cool. Let's go back. Calendar. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of dig this. It's, I wish it did more. But yeah, January 2000. Wow, it was a long. I can't believe that was a long time ago now. There's our address book with myself in it. Sent mail. Obviously, we've never sent a mail on this thing. Settings. Check messages at 2. Oh yeah, so this thing can actually check email independently. You can just leave it plugged in, and it totally does its thing. That's cool. Looks like there's a side users. Yeah, so this is where you can configure different users. Let's see. Yeah, then you create your user. You can choose all your settings there for your email host. You'll note I don't see any settings for SSL or anything like that. This kind of, I guess, predates all that. Yeah, now as far as how it gets email, because usually you would have needed an internet provider, I'm guessing this would have dialed up to the phone company, basically as a dial-up ISP client, and then, yeah, just download email and that's it. Yeah, it's too bad they didn't do a little bit more with it, because, it's the kind of device I would be quite happy to sit there and play a game of solitaire or whatnot. I mean, let's face it, those are the only things people were buying computers for in the 90s, solitaire and email. Yeah, it's a cool little device, cool little piece of history. It's going to appear again in the video that I'm working on about internet appliances. And yeah, it was cheap. I think it was like $10 or something like that. So, it's just another little stepping stone on the way to what we have today with our smartphones and everything. Now, this final item you might recognize if you had watched my experimental shorts videos from a few weeks ago. This is the Shinshu Seiki, or Epson EP101 printer. And like I said, I did a shorts video of it. I was kind of experimenting with the format, but with shorts, you have a maximum of 60 seconds. It's really hard to say everything you want to say in just 60 seconds. So yeah, I thought I would just add, a little bit more detail to it. And I think this is actually a new old stock unit or a replacement unit. And the reason for that is, number one, it appears to be in an original Honeywell box. Honeywell, as I recall, was a fairly major corporate supplier for electronics equipment. So I think that would kind of fit with that. And then the other thing is, when you open the box and you take it out, I mean, it looks absolutely spotless. There's no rust anywhere on this thing. Like, it's just perfect. There's no dust. There's no oil or grime anywhere. Like, there's nothing that you would typically see from a printer that had been used. I have to kind of brace it with both hands. This thing is incredibly heavy for what it is. I mean, it's just a solid mass of metal machine here. And it is, yeah, it's just so perfectly clean. And another reason I think it's new old stock is it has this printout, which was included on top of it. And I've seen that a lot in my own business with, point of sale printers and that sort of thing. They often will ship with a test printout just to prove that they were working when they left the factory. It's sort of their last QA duty before they ship it out. And yeah, you can see literally every character printed in 2 colors that this thing can print. The third reason I think it's a new old stock unit is because it's missing the carriage that goes across the front here, which would typically have the 2 spools of ribbon, and then that would pass in front of these hammers and then produce the characters that you're looking for. I believe that whole assembly basically just slides into these guides here, just like that. I don't think it's mechanically connected to anything other than these striker arms. And yeah, I just thought this was really cool. This printer dates from around 1968. And my understanding is it came about as a result of a need for a highly portable printer for printing off things like time slips at the Olympics. This is actually the genesis of the Epson name, and eventually the company would go by this name. Serial number 60,649, so yeah, this is probably a little ways down the line in production. In terms of how it works, well, basically you have your ribbons on the front. The ribbon, as I said, gets pulled in front of these hammers. You've got a drum here, which I don't think I can fully expose, but you can actually see all the characters across the top. And depending on where this drum has turned to, and then which hammer basically strikes it. You can print out words, numbers, stuff like that. You don't have very many characters to work with. It looks like we've got like large characters here, and then we've got a subset of smaller characters. So yeah, I mean, it's, how many characters is that? That's one, two. So it's about 20 characters across. So this wasn't really intended for computer use. This was more intended for calculators, cash registers, receipt printing, that sort of thing. I don't see any way to power it directly, so I'm guessing the power goes through this connector, which looks like a Centronics printer interface. I doubt it is, though. I think it's probably a proprietary design that just uses the same connector, and I would guess the voltage to drive all the motors. Yeah, I mean, it must come off of there somewhere. You can see all these little actuators here, solenoids. Yeah, it must, this here, yeah, these wires are going into this connector, so it must provide the power somehow. I would love to power it up and try running it. Of course, I don't have the ribbon assembly for the front. I could probably get around that by just rigging something up, but then I would need documentation to basically figure out the pinout for this connector and provide it with the right power. I believe it runs on 16 volts or something like that. So yeah, and it probably would need some oiling. I see there's a spring that's fallen off there. I should probably fix that. This is literally the first Epson printer like ever. It's pretty it's pretty rare you get to have a major company like that's first product in a certain line. But yeah, these are all the individual little hammers. It's just like a typewriter, basically. It's kind of like a teleprinter, really. I mean, teleprinters often had a drum like this, and then there'd be a hammer. Sometimes it would be like this with a whole bunch of hammers. Sometimes it would just be one hammer. It just kind of moves and strikes as it needs to go. I just can't even wrap my head around the engineering involved to get the timing just right so that you could print out a coherent line of, like an actual English word or something. But yeah, that is the Epson model EP101, 1968, first Epson printer ever. Okay, well that's it for mini unfridging number 3. Part 3. I intended this to just be a very quick filler video while I was working out some technical glitches with this mindset, because I wanted to do a really in-depth video and show you sort of what it could do, particularly with video production. I wanted to show you how video production was done with something like this back in the mid-80s, long before we had Adobe Premiere. Unfortunately, these boxes, well, I don't have manuals for them or anything, so that's not helping. I actually have 2 of them. One of them I plugged in and it just blew up. I don't know what happened there. And then this one, when you plug it into the mindset just freezes up. It just shuts right down and it won't turn on, won't do anything. And I'm pretty sure I've got all the right cabling. The power supply came with this one and the cable came with the other one. So yeah, I don't know what that's about, but I'm going to continue to work on it, and I'm working on some other videos in parallel to it in case it doesn't work out again. But yeah, that's it for this video. You will see this somehow, some way, at some point. It's just a matter of getting the information together and getting it done. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this. Our production schedule, it's summer right now, and in this part of BC, believe it or not, it does get quite hot, especially in this unair-conditioned space that I'm using as a studio. So yeah, it's probably going to be a slightly lower production for a couple months, and then hopefully things will pick up again in the fall. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video, hopefully with this one, but whatever comes next. Thank you.